It is mid-November. We haven't seen all the movies yet, but that doesn't stop Fearless Gold Derby from predicting the Oscar race, these top categories with our editors moving from left to right along the bottom screen. Chris Beachum, Daniel Montgomery, Paul Sheehan, Marcus Dixon, and myself, Tom O'Neill. What we're going to do here is actually try to predict what's going to win. Maybe foolishly, maybe wisely. We'll find out later. We have not yet seen Joy. We've not yet seen Hateful Eight and The Revenant. We've seen almost everything else. Two of you guys are predicting Spotlight will win, which lines up with the predictions of our experts. 12 of the 22 currently say that's true. Paul Sheehan, defend your Spotlight forecast.
Well, I would first note, of course, the film is about journalists, so I think there's an institutional bias. But yeah, I think that it's going to win because passion gets you the nomination, but then a consensus vote gets you the win, and it's the least offensive. Everyone likes it.
It's about priests diddling little boys. What do you mean it's the least offensive?
In terms of the films, it's not got Tarantino out there talking the Hateful Eight and getting bad press, and just you can sort of think about each other of the other top contenders and say, well, this or that, box office or temperamental directors or feisty stars, whereas Spotlight it's a big ensemble, so probably you could very well win SAG Ensemble, not a great predictor of Best Picture, but I just think that it ticks enough boxes, critical reviews, good box office so far, big cast, well-liked most of them. Interesting subject.
Competitor. I understand why it went out front early on, and then we have not yet seen a strong rival take it down. Daniel, pipe in. You believe this Spotlight thing too? I'm skeptical. Convince me.
I'm skeptical too, but I sort of have it in there by default at this moment. I think it can win if it's an off year. Like if the movies that are yet to be seen, like Joy and The Revenant and The Hateful Eight, if those all kind of fall out and disappoint, then I think it gets in there. I think it has an Argo quality. It doesn't have quite the Ben Affleck factor and the rooting factor of him as the director, because its director, Tom McCarthy, isn't that well known, but it has the same kind of populist appeal. It's a very straightforward kind of studio, crowd-pleasing film. It's about
crowd pleasing.
it's about the child sex abuse scandal in the Catholic Church, but it's about the heroic journalists who crusade against the child abusers in the Catholic Church and the leadership that let it happen. So I don't think there's much controversy there anymore in terms of nobody's rushing to defend the Catholic Church for how it handled this. And it has that same kind of thrilling quality, though it's not quite a thriller like Argo was. So I think if other films in this race falter, and it has the reviews, if it keeps up at the box office, doing well as it has been, it's right up there. I think it's the one to beat by default if none of the other films that we have yet to see come through.
I was less convinced that this was possible just a few days ago. Over the last 5 or 6 days, while talking with Academy members, I am hearing strong Spotlight votes in the field now. That tells me it really can happen. You're right. And it has an Academy-friendly cast of A-list stars. It's got an important subject. It doesn't have an overdue director component there, and it does have the ick factor given what the topic is, but yet they've been very courageous in terms of what they pick as Best Picture, like 12 Years a Slave just 2 years ago. But still, Chris, you pipe in here. A lot of this has to do with lack of competition yet, because you and I are betting on Joy. Give us your anti-Spotlight, pro-Joy point of view, or maybe you're equally in favor of both. What do you think?
First of all, it's a fun year. I mean, this time last year, we pretty much knew 3 out of the 4 acting races, and I think we had it kind of down to Birdman, Boyhood on Best Picture. And there's 5 or 6
we had Unbroken in there as well.
Unbroken, but that was sight unseen. So, Joy,
we're in the same box this year.
Joy, the trailer just really captivated me. I thought it was wonderful. If the film is as good as the trailer, I mean, and again, a cast full of people that the Academy knows. some past nominees. Jennifer Lawrence is one. I'm also hearing a lot of spotlight buzz among voters, and I could see it winning, but I got this feeling about Joy, and there is an overdue director factor there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Marcus, pipe in here.
Oh yeah, they absolutely love David O. Russell. And by the way, thank you everyone. You got the memo. It's Blue Shirt Day. It's absolutely fantastic. But the thing about Spotlight, Tom, you kind of mentioned it's kind of an icky feeling to it with not the way it's done, but the actual content of the movie. And the director, Tom McCarthy, he's actually an actor, and they don't like giving actors directing.
Yes, they do. They haven't lately, but they have historically. Wow.
No.
Okay.
But yeah, Joy, I'm such a David Russell fan. Maybe that's why I have it at #1, Sight Unseen. But it's basically a placeholder because no one's seen it. But I have that at #1. I have Revenant at #2, another kind of placeholder movie. I think of the 3 that we haven't seen, Hateful Eight, I think from what we've heard, it may not be a front runner like we thought it was last week.
The Academy is 70% male, and over the age of 60, and not exactly female friendly. You can go back to look, what female perspective films have won Best Picture, and you have to go back to $1 Million Baby. Before that, maybe Chicago. It's very rare that they go there. I would say that that's one of the reasons Dreamgirls didn't get nominated for Best Picture, because it was less a racial factor than a gender factor. They just weren't going to make the leap of the quest of these women. That said, I think that Joy, while that has a big disadvantage there, and it doesn't feel important in terms of big pressing issues like slavery or the church scandal in this case of Spotlight, I'm picking Joy Sight Unseen now, partly like Chris. I think the trailer is brilliant, but I also think that Russell is brilliant in terms of he gets the raw nerve of life and human existence. We saw it in Silver Linings Playbook. It was brilliant what he did there. It wasn't quite great enough, and I think that if he's going to make that leap finally artistically, we're going to see it here, because this is a movie about the American dream. It's about all of a sudden hitting the jackpot with something that you've created, like Gold Derby for me, right? But in the case of Jennifer Lawrence, I think it's brilliant that he used a woman, because that gives you an outside point of view. It's not a white male quest. It's a disenfranchised group of people, and that makes the story more powerful. Also, it's just emotional in a way that The King's Speech was emotional, and it ended up beating The Social Network. I'm kind of talking myself into it here, but it also has an Academy-friendly cast. We don't know yet. I don't think The Revenant, haven't seen it yet, but I don't think 3 hours of watching Leo trudge through the snow is emotionally gripping enough in a sentimental way that they like to win Best Picture. Anyone else have some thoughts to jump in here?
Yeah, I think the bigger problem for The Revenant is the fact that Alejandro Gonzalez Iñárritu just won last year for Birdman. Maybe if they I don't see them giving him 2 in a row. So this is the kind of film where it feels like picture and director would match up. So it would have to be the masterpiece of masterpieces for them to go back to him again for the 2nd year in a row, and his film for the 2nd year in a row, after he won 3 times last year as a producer, writer, and a director. So if he hadn't won for Birdman, I'd be more inclined to put The Revenant in my top spot by default.
Chris, the experts say that Martian is in 2nd place, and you've got a great Ridley Scott theory in terms of director in case of a split. Explain all that to us.
Well, we've seen more splits in recent years than we ever had before, and I don't think The Martian could win Best Picture, but it might be a Gravity kind of situation where they want to reward him for a body of work, and it's also, when you think about movies that we're talking about, like a Spotlight and a Joy and some of these, I don't know that you walk out of the theater going, wow, what a directing achievement. So I think, a visual movie like The Martian, and his backstory of so many great movies over the years, and not all sci-fi movies, although that's where we first got to know him. And when you throw in a Thelma and Louise and a Gladiator kind of gives him that IOU factor you always talk about, because it won Best Picture, but he did not win Best Director. We saw him the other night, Marcus and I did, and what made me, I already had him in first, and what made me even more think he, has a shot here is he wasn't mincing any words with us. He said, at my age, I've got 4 nominations already in my past, and I'm going to go for it this year. He said, I'm going to do every interview. I'm going to do every request. I'm going to do everything that my people tell me I need to do to try to win this thing right now.
Marcus?
Yeah. He has a very regal feeling to him, doesn't he? I felt like I was, talking to a king or something like that. He's very, very awesome guy. I'm glad we got to meet him. Back to The Revenant real quick. Tom, when you said it was 3 hours trudging through the snow, that just made me think of Dances with Wolves, and that won 7 Oscars.
Oh, come on, Dances with Wolves. They broke the story up. There were a lot of different component parts to that. I could be wrong. It's happened on rare occasions in the past, but I'm just not gripped by this thing. Paul Sheehan, you were a believer, as I was, that Gravity could win Best Picture a couple years ago. It ended up with 7 out of 10 nominations, including Best Director and editing and all these other things, as I recall. The Martian could actually do it. I mean, I buy Chris's argument for Ridley Scott. I think that's very compelling in that there is a parallel between The Martian and Gravity. But when Chris said, "Oh, Gravity," I mean, just dismissed, couldn't win, that's nonsense, isn't it? Because it won PGA and
tied 12 Years a Slave. And the reason we're seeing the split, just so everyone knows, is because in 2009 the Academy brought back preferential ballot only for Best Picture, so that's a ranking of all the nominees. Before that, it was a straight line vote, and you would just tick the box for Dances with Wolves and then Kevin Costner. But now, since 2009, you have to rank the Best Picture nominees, and I think that's why we're seeing splits. I think in terms of Gravity versus 12 Years, the dirty little secret is, do all Oscar voters watch all movies? And I spoke to a number of Oscar voters that had not watched 12 Years a Slave, saying, well, why do I need to watch it? I saw Roots. That gives you a sense of the demographic of the Oscars. But sort of next season rolled around, oh, I voted for 12 Years a Slave. I voted for it. I mean, because they felt compelled to with the brilliant campaign of Fox Searchlight. So, I think that in terms of this year, I don't think we're going to have, there isn't that socially relevant film really other than Spotlight. I mean, what else kind of speaks to the social relevance aspect of things? So, but in terms of The Martian, I don't know, popcorn pictures like that seem to have sort of fallen out of favor. The Academy has become much bigger snobs in a way. I mean, in the old days when The Sting could win, or Airport and The Towering Inferno were nominated, I just don't know if unfortunately, they've sort of succumbed to that groupthink and looking at what the critics are rewarding and all of that. And
well, they went with Lord of the Rings. Come on, they go with popcorn pictures every now and then.
But that I think was the third film, and that was, I think, a way to honor the epic nature of that. I mean, that sort of mammoth production, and it's popcorn, and yet it has the pedigree of sort of this Oxford Don writes these books. All those sound guys and visual effects guys probably read them 27 times when they were teenagers. So because the Academy
Argo and The Departed were popcorn pictures in a way. Certainly, The Departed was. I think The Martian is really in the race. I think people love the movie. Personally, I think it's going to get a ton of nominations, and I don't think because it doesn't have the green aliens in it and all that other kind of stuff. It's like Gravity was. It's sci-fi that's friendly, and if there is no real strong competition, if it comes down to The Martian versus Spotlight, let's say Joy disappoints and The Hateful Eight crashes and The Revenant is just frozen out literally, then The Martian, I think, is in the race, and they would go back to the popcorn picture if they wanted to.
Oh, right. Sure. And remember, when they're doing that final count in February, it really matters that you sort of are still standing as they winnow the field down, and that you don't have to have the most number one votes. You just have to be higher ranked on the other ballots than your main competition. So then it becomes a question of, is Spotlight or The Martian more likely to be higher ranked on the ballots of people that have voted for The Revenant and Hateful Eight and all that? So that's where the lobbying matters, and the the perceptions, and certainly the fact that it's an enormous hit. I think probably making far more money than the studio ever thought, and not just in America but around the world. The Martian, I think that really has boosted it. And we've seen Ridley Scott rising up the ranks of Best Director in the last couple of weeks. He wasn't even making our top 5 3 weeks ago, and now he's a solid third.
Right, and now we actually see him win.
I'm a big sci-fi fantasy fan. I'm glad The Martian's in there. People are also talking about Star Wars and Mad Max, so it's a good year for the genre films. I don't think any got in last year, did they?
No, the last sci-fi movie was Inception to get in, and then there was the year where Avatar and District 9 both made it in. So we could see. Let's remember that there were 8 nominees last year, 9 the year before, and the year before that. So we haven't been seeing 10 lately, but it would be nice if we brought that back. Do any of you guys see a scenario where any other movie than the ones we've been talking about could actually win?
The movie I hear the most people talking about, I don't think I've had a voter yet. I've talked to several. You've talked to several, Tom. Marcus has. All of you have in New York too. Brooklyn is the one. Yes. Every time I say, "What was your favorite movie or two of this year?" they'll say Brooklyn, and then they'll add something else, to that list. But I haven't had one person not say Brooklyn. So I didn't think it was that extraordinary. But I have made sure that it's in my top 5, I think, and I moved Ronan into actress, and even though that's a tough race, and certainly it could get into some of the visual technical awards and maybe writing. So I mean, it's one to kind of watch for if it just becomes that beloved movie of the year.
And you've talked to, it's men as well as women that are telling you that, Chris?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really consistent. The other one
I've heard the most people say
Room.
is Spotlight.
Oh.
Well, or Room. You just hear it from everyone. They go, that's the little whiplash of the year, which Whiplash lost last year, of course, but it was the little indie that they all say, oh my God, it's just so thrilling and amazing. We have to account for the possibility that we could see a Hurt Locker phenomenon take place where all of a sudden you have that little gritty movie that wins the early awards. We assume this year it'll be Spotlight taking the critics' kudos and then being carried along. But what if it's Straight Outta Compton? What if it's Room? What if it's one of those? And all of a sudden you could see things taking off. I don't think that Straight Outta Compton is out of the race entirely. The Academy screening was really strong, and I think the race issues are important. It's about media. It's about entertainment. I could see, I'm trying to look ahead to what, because this is a derby after all, what jumps out front at the Critics' Awards. You guys, what else do you think could happen there? That we're certainly not going to see The Martian win there.
Am I crazy for thinking Inside Out is being, people are not giving it the credit that it deserves? I mean, 99% on Rotten Tomatoes. Everyone loved this film. It was a big box office hit.
Yeah,
can't win.
No, can't win. They're never going to give 1/5 of the Academy is actors. They're never going to give a Best Picture to something that only employs a handful of actors that you never see.
That's a good point.
Simple.
Daniel, you're the film critic type among us. We always tease you about that. You're the cineast amongst us. What do you think is going to take that Best Picture at New York and LA film critics?
Spotlight seems like a good, a kind of New York friendly film, and depending on how Joy goes, maybe that for LA. I never know exactly how these how the critics are gonna
they're not going to
shake out.
They're not going for a chick flick,
Well, it's a movie about a woman, but it's directed by David O. Russell. That definitely that makes a difference, I think. For the guy-driven, critics and the guy-driven Academy. This is from a guy they know who has directed, guy movies like The Fighter and Three Kings and American Hustle. And with his muse, Jennifer Lawrence. I think they'll make an exception for a girl movie if it's David O. Russell and Jennifer Lawrence potentially, if it hits big. I mean, I think. Didn't American Hustle surprise by winning New York Film Critics a couple of years ago? I think it did. So I think Joy, depending on if it turns out well, that could be a surprise critical hit. I'm not sure what else does though. I think looking down on my Best Picture list, I think something like Son of Saul might be more contender at like at the National Society, where they do pick a lot of foreign films and a lot of films that aren't really the big Oscar or the highly expected Oscar contenders like the other critics do. So that's a contender for a lot of critics awards. Although I think that's more likely to sweep foreign film awards, and then maybe National Society picks it as Best Picture.
Who else has some thoughts?
No, I was thinking about Son of Saul and the LA critics in particular. And also, that makes me think of Straight Outta Compton for Los Angeles.
Yeah, I think that could actually happen. I think that we could see it, that movie take off at Los Angeles, yes, and then go all the way. I think everybody's underestimating it at Gold Derby, and it's a powerful film that you hear a lot of out here, and they're campaigning it very shrewdly. It's not going to win, I don't think, unless it actually gets big momentum. Other movies we're not mentioning, but we got to put out there are movies like Carol is doing very well in our rankings here in terms of nominations. I don't think any of us believe it could actually win. Bridge of Spies, of course, is very strong among Academy members when you ask them about their favorite movies, and Spielberg has a great track record getting in there, of course.
And a lot of them remember the incidents in Bridge of Spies, quite frankly. I mean,
Yes.
This isn't history to them. They lived it. And it really resonated with them. One of the best reviewed Spielberg pictures in over a decade.
Yes. And what else am I forgetting here, guys?
Steve Jobs.
Steve Jobs, my favorite
Steve
movie of the
Jobs,
year. Oh, my
Tom.
God.
Yeah.
Yes. A couple of you guys don't have it in your Best Picture predictions, do you? I think, or no, Chris put it in now. Or it didn't. Anyway, a couple guys didn't have it in there. Yes, a lot of love at the on the Academy level from the voters there for that movie. Don't write it off simply because it's only made $17 million, and Universal made a stupid mistake of rolling it out too wide at the box office. I'm talking to you viewers here. Look, how much money did Still Alice make last year? 45 cents. It's not always about box office. It's sometimes about the great achievement of the film and the power of the film, and that's about as powerful as you can get.
Isn't there a perception that it should have made more, though, whereas Still Alice, people knew it wasn't going to be a blockbuster? Yes,
there was that perception, but I don't think anyone thinks the movie's a failure. They realize it's a niche movie where we all thought both. We all thought it was a niche film, but also it had the potential to be mass market, and it just turned out not to be that kind of deal.
I liked it. I hope it gets in there. Someone in our forums just had this great idea. Maybe it was the title. Maybe the title just wasn't good enough.
Yes, I've been saying that all along. Yeah, they didn't call The Social Network Mark Zuckerberg. I mean, come on. No one would have gone to see that movie. That was a big miscalculation. But it was based on a book, called Steve Jobs, and so that's why they did all of that.
Well, I mean, yeah, one of the best-selling books of the year. I mean, if everyone that bought that book had gone to see it, it would have made more money than it did. I mean, it's sort of interesting that they bought Walter Isaacson's biography of the man. Didn't use any of it, but they bought it. and
I've got to chew all of you guys out about Danish Girl. None of you have it in your Best Picture predictions. That is absolutely ludicrous. Think about this. It was in all of our predictions, top up there when we saw it. It had a great reception at Toronto. All of our experts put it up there, and it's just kind of fallen. It hasn't been released. The Academy hasn't seen it. They don't see it until a few more days, and it doesn't get released till the 21st, so we won't know what its box office thing is. It is a lush movie with an important theme, very Academy-friendly film that's going to do very well with the Oscars. I think it's in for Best Picture. I think you're insane not to have it in there.
So Tom, you think that a good 1 out of 20 Oscar voters is going to rank it number one. You're confident in that. They're going to put it above every other film and rank it number one to make sure it gets that nomination.
I think it has that, sure. Mm-hmm.
1 out of 20. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, here's one thing I thought about. Oh, go ahead, Marcus.
I was just going to say, Paul earlier mentioned, there's maybe not a socially relevant film. It might be The Danish Girl.
Right. And Carol, is very socially relevant. That's going to get a lot of number one votes. It has a lot of passion. People love that film. I wanted a little more from it. I wanted another kind of plot layer there. But yet, who am I? What we see up on the screen is strong and powerful.
Here's the interesting
thing. When we just added, thanks to Daniel, several more of the tech categories to the prediction center, and I almost put Danish Girl in last night. I really need to, because if you just start adding up nominations, you're looking at, I'm not saying it's going to get all these, but you're looking at the possibility of production design, costume design, makeup, possibly score, because it's Desplat, who they love. You got potentially 2 acting nominations. You start adding those up and you go, well, you know, it's rare that a movie gets, you know, 5, 6, 7, 8 Oscar nominations and doesn't get into Best Picture.
Here's the interesting thing about this race, though, something that I've noticed when just trying to narrow things down to my top 10 for Best Picture is usually we have a situation where, you know, by November we've certainly narrowed it down to 10 or 15 movies that could get in. And I think this year we've got 15 to 20 that legitimately could still get into the top 8 or 9 or 10 or however many nominees there are this year. And, you know, talking about Danish Girl, I don't have it in my predictions currently. I should, but I'm looking at my list of 10, and I think I have to bump one of you out, and I'm not sure who to do. So that's what it's a dilemma I'm having this year more than in years past, where movies that I would be predicting under almost every other circumstance, I'm not, just because they won't fit in my top 10. And they're like, you know, Brooklyn is another one I don't have in my top 10 right now, but I might.
You're insane. Put it in there.
But I have to take something out, which is you know, it's a zero-sum game. So I have to decide, before I decide Brooklyn gets in, I have to decide what it knocks out. So it's hard for me to try and find room for everything, because this is a more crowded year, which is a good thing, I think. There's less certainty, and it feels less concentrated around the 10 movies we know are vying for like 8 or 9 slots. This feels like genuinely suspenseful, like what movies will even be nominated.
Marcus, you were at AFI with me. You saw the reception for Concussion. They loved that movie. This was a Hollywood-centric crowd. We could see that in there, right?
Right. And at first I thought you were going to say By the Sea, because we also saw By the Sea at AFI Fest. Not so much about that one. No. But this is going to be...
No, I think By the Sea makes people give themselves concussions. Isn't that how that...
Yeah. I have a feeling this might be a great year for female-centric films with Room, Carol, Inside Out, The Danish Girl, Suffragette, I'm missing some, Joy. I think last year there was maybe one.
I smell a blog item. Okay.
and Leo, when in The Revenant, I mean, he's wearing that fur. I mean, it's all...
Oh my God.
Let's mention a couple other contenders here that are trying to zoom in here. The Big Short was just debuted the other night. I just moved it in my predictions with some queasiness. It does look a lot like Wolf of Wall Street meets Moneyball. They were both nominees. Talk about an Academy-friendly cast, a movie that feels important. And Trumbo, you know, Pete Hammond and I got a lot of grief when we didn't mention Trumbo in our video the other day that ran, and I thought, you know what, they're right to say that, because it's certainly one of my favorite movies of the year, at being a media type person, and it's about Hollywood, and it's about righting the wrongs of Hollywood and raging against the injustice of this town. Look, we just saw The Artist win Best Picture because it was a reminder of how difficult the transition is from when a media revolution comes in, like it was in the old days of sound in that film, and then today, of course, with the advance of 3D and the internet and all these other things that are happening to really rock the joint. So I actually could see Trumbo get nominated for Best Picture. Do any of you guys have any other titles you want to volunteer as potential nominees here? Star Wars, we mentioned that, right?
I've got Star Wars in my 9th or 10th slot. I just, you know, it's going to have to be an incredibly good movie and not just a box office hit, but it's projected to be the #1 box office hit of all time, and usually when that happens, if it's a really good movie on top of that, it gets into Best Picture.
Especially with 10 slots, or up to 10 slots.
Final thoughts. Anybody have any final thoughts here?
I'm just busily moving things around my list, moving things in and out, up and down.
As we talk, okay.
My top 10 is drastically different than it was when it started. Well, not drastically different, but it's there's some movement.
Well, what did we? All right, so specify.
My final thought.
Go ahead. Well, wait, Paul. So what did we convince you of to change, Daniel?
I put Danish Girl in. I moved Steve Jobs down a little. It's still in my top 10. I moved Inside Out down, but it's still in my top 10, holding on just barely. I actually had to take out Room, which I might put back in at some point.
Oh, that's going to be nominated. Put it back in there.
I can't see that we're talking about 12, 15 movies that are definitely going to be nominated, so something's got to give. And
this is your job, kiddo. Paul, what did you want to say?
No, my final thought is I want everyone watching this to either update or make your predictions, because really what we need is to hear from you, and especially I love to crunch the numbers, and when I get a few thousand people making their predictions, then it helps us really figure out how those goofy preferential ballots are going to work. So yeah, please make your predictions. Just
we have more than 1,000 now or so. We keep them updated too, right, Paul?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. That you know, there's because it's the thing, and especially the Golden Globe side. I mean, that is a shifting sea of is it a comedy, is it a drama, is it a musical? So you have to really pay attention. If you go to your predictions and there's a hole, or there's sometimes our system will pop in somebody's name, an actor's name, into Best Picture because your film that you've gotten there has suddenly been taken out of drama and put over in comedy on the Golden Globes.
Yeah, and that's just a tech glitch when it happens. Usually it's just a blank if we've moved things around from category classification, which we're about to do again, by the way, with the Golden Globes and Joy. 4 different HFPA members told me last night there is no way they're going to permit Joy to compete as a comedy, despite what Fox says and despite the journalistic reports of late, that they've seen 20 minutes of it. It is a drama. They have not yet seen the whole thing. They're going to see it in the next 5 or 6 days, and then they'll make their determination. There isn't, by the way, technically a committee that meets. Whoever wants to show up and vote when the committee is convened among members gets to vote, and that's how it's handled. So they haven't sounded off yet, but they were all taking great pride last night when we ran into Chris and Zach and I ran into a lot of the HFPA members telling us that they're not taking that guff from the studios to say that Alicia Vikander or Rooney Mara are supporting when they know that they're actually leads. So they're being rather feisty now this year. So watch Joy move back. That's my prediction into drama, even though it's not official yet. Anyway, let's wrap up here. We'll talk separately about Best Actor and Best Actress. Update your predictions or make them at Gold Derby now. There are prizes of $500, $300, and $200 for the first, second, and third place. We pay off in Amazon gift certificates, and they could be yours. Hurry up.